Hi, I'm David Branch, and I want to welcome you back to the third video in this series. Now, in the first video, we talked about you, the leadership, and how everything rises and falls based upon you or your perspective. In the second video, we talked about your team and how your team is your lifeline. And now we're going to talk about the third major component for you to have a successful business, your product or your service. Without your product or your service, you have no sale. Without no sale, you have no money to support your freedom to give you what you want. All goes together back to the big picture. Everything we always do, we understand we need to take it back to why are we really doing this in the first place? And that's it, right? Now, when I first started, I was the technician. You know, I did the work, and then I built up business, and I needed more help, so I hired somebody, and then I hired somebody else. And somewhere along the way, I decided they had, helped me long enough, and so I just delegated them a few tasks, or I left them on the job site, and I went away for a while, and I came back, and I was like, you idiot! What have you done? They tore something up, they broke something, they messed something up, or they were just working too slow. And, I was paying them by the hour, so I was like, y'all are just milking the clock, whatever it was. And I lived like that constantly. I was always scared to leave a job site because if I weren't there with my thumb on every little detail, they were just going to screw it up. That was my life for a long, long time. But now I have absolute confidence in my team's ability to create a product of excellence when I'm nowhere around. Actually, I rarely see any of our projects anymore. We have huge jobs that we do that I don't put my eyes on. And there was a time that I wouldn't have let my guy set a mousetrap without me micromanaging them. It was that bad. Well, if you understand what I'm talking about here, then I'm going to help you create a confidence in your team's ability to create an excellent product without you being around so that you can get more freedom from your company. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Now, the first thing you need is a perspective. We always start with perspective in everything we do because it's how we see. Because as the leader, our business or our organization, the health of it depends upon the health of us as the leader or the health of our perspective. What is our perspective? That's what we've learned. That's what we've been exposed to. It's our way of seeing things. So we need to make sure we're seeing things through the right lens. So perspective on your product. What is it that you sell? What is your product? What is your service? You may say, if you're in lawn maintenance, you may say, well, we cut grass. You do cut grass, but that's not your product. That's not your service. That's just part of what's necessary. But your service or your product is whatever solves somebody's problem. Okay? So, what problem does your product or your service solve? You've got to identify that. It's not just cutting grass. Understand this. The customer, your customer, if you're in lawn maintenance, they want to have a life where they can pursue their dreams, having a wonderful, close, tight-knit family. And they envision playing in the yard together. Dad and Junior in the backyard kicking the ball around. And if they have big old tall weeds, they're afraid Junior might get bit by a snake. So they want somebody to come in and keep that yard clean. Now, Dad could do it himself on Saturday, but then it takes away from the precious time that he could be playing ball with his son. So he decides that he's going to exchange money, he's going to give you money in exchange for his freedom so that he can live out his dream of playing ball in the backyard with Junior without him getting snake bit. Right? That's kind of what it is. So you're not cutting grass, you're enabling this family to connect and live out their dream of how life should be. What is it that you really offer? If you're a barber, are you cutting hair? No, you're not cutting hair. You're helping somebody have more self-confidence. They walk around a little taller. When your hair looks right, you feel good about how you look. Your self-confidence is better. You don't just cut hair. So no matter what you do, think bigger. What is it? What problem is it that you solve? And it's not just an external problem. It's not that they just need their grass cut. See, if they didn't cut the grass, no big deal. I mean, you could just trample down a horse path or something, right? You could make it back and forth through the weeds. So you don't need your grass cut. They want it cut because of something inside that says it's safer, and people in the town won't talk about us or whatever it is. But there's an emotional need inside of them that drives them to hire you to cut their grass, to help them create a safe backyard where they can live out their dreams with their kid. Okay? So think about that. No matter what you're doing, whether you're remodeling homes, or you're cutting hair, or you're cutting grass, or you're a plumber or a restaurant owner. If you're a restaurant owner, you're not just providing food. You're giving that family an opportunity to get away and have time together without having to clean up the dishes and all this, so that they can spend more time doing something here. It's always about the bigger picture. Always relate that, okay? Now the second thing is, why do they buy from you? What you don't want to say is because we are the lowest price. You don't want to compete on price. If you are, you're in a race to the bottom, and that's a race you don't want to win. You don't want to be competing on price. You want to compete on value. You want to compete on value, okay? Why are you better? Why do you deliver a better service? How do you stand out from your competition? But what is it about your company that they buy into? What is it that they get from you? Even if the quality of the job is the same, what is it that they get from you? I mean, if the grass is cut and all the grass is removed and all that, why would they choose a different company? What's the deciding factor? Maybe it's the peace of mind. Maybe it's the consistency. Maybe it's the fact that they believe that you have a group of workers that are coming to their house and they feel safe with their kids being around them. Whatever it is. But now that goes back to the leadership and the team. You've got to create a culture of that promotes second mile service to their customers. Or you've got to create a culture that just has trustworthy, smiling faces that try to improve the life of the people that they interact with. Whatever your culture is, that's a great reason why they buy from you and not your competitor. You don't want it to be money. Now, you've got to have a fair price, but you don't want to be competing on price. That's a race to the bottom that you don't want to win, because if you win that race, you lose. Okay? I used to be in a race to the bottom. There was a time that I competed on price. Miserable. Leaves you broke and overworked. That's it. If you're doing that, you know what I mean. Decide what problem you solve and why they should buy from you, and start selling by the way you add value to their life. You add value by helping them getting closer to this and helping your customer to see how using you helps them get closer to one of these. That's it. You're going to help them maybe get the freedom so that they can have time to play in the yard with their son, whatever it may be, okay? You got to connect that on your own. Now, the second thing we got to have is confidence. How can we have confidence in our product and that it's going to be consistent time and time and time again without you having your thumb on everybody and everything that goes on? First thing you got to have is your team's got to be connected. Got to have a team connection. I can spell it, I promise you. I just can't write it. Connection. Okay. What I mean by team connection? Your team's got to be connected to the product or the service that you're delivering. They don't need to feel like they're just out there sweating for you. All right. They've got to be connected to the big picture. Most people, honestly, at least most of our employees, it seems, or a good portion of them, they are so busy just trying to make it day to day. They're just in survival mode. You might be in survival mode yourself. And when you're in survival mode, you don't think about your dreams. You don't think about your future. You don't think about the one day maybes. All you can think about is paying your bills, getting up, going to work, and dealing with all the mess that's going on at home or in the rest of your life. And when you're in that situation, you don't really take time to think about what you really want. You don't think about this sort of stuff. But if you're going to have a great team and you have that you can have confidence in what they're producing, then you've got to help them connect to this. So as the leader, you've got to first help your team live a big picture life. Help them understand the bigger goal. But then you've got to help them connect that their customer wants this as well. So you've got to help them relate that they and the person that they are serving really want the same thing in life. Pursue the dreams, discover the mission, and live their life fully alive. That's what we all want. But when you can help your team connect what they're doing to a bigger picture, it changes everything, because then they're working from a heart level. They're understanding they're serving. So when they're cutting that grass, they're like, no. We're giving that dad the opportunity to have the time to play in the backyard with his son this weekend, because he's not going to have to waste it cutting the grass. And then they can think, that's what I want. I want to play with my son this weekend in the backyard without having to fool with cutting the grass. So they can relate to the customer. Does that make sense? Whatever you're doing, make sure your team connects on a heart level with how they're serving the bigger picture, because we all want to know that we matter, and that what we do makes a difference. They need to know that cutting that grass makes a difference in the big picture of things. If not, they'll get burned out, they'll get tired of what they're doing, and they'll resent coming to work, and they'll kind of lose hope. You don't want to do that. Build it up by helping them connect on a heart level. Now, the second thing you got to have is a system of constant improvement. Put constant right there. It's just too long. You don't want to write it. But you've got to have a system of constant improvement. A system of constant improvement, constant improvement, constant improvement. Okay? What I'm saying is you've got to constantly improve your product all the time. So how are we going to do that? Now, the first thing is you've got to have a strategy. When I say constant improvement, here's what we do. For 21 years now, we've been doing the same work in the same town with the same customer base. But what we used to do is just get up and go to work. I would go out and secure a job. We would collect some money. I would order some materials, or a project manager or somebody would order some materials, and we would send the crew out. We'd say, go to this address. We might do a walkthrough with the foreman or something. We'd say, go to this address and do this job. Go replace these windows, or go remodel this bathroom. Here's the colors that people picked out. And that's what we would tell them. And we would maybe give them some budget ranges if we trusted our guys to know the numbers at the time, right? But that was just taking me down to the bottom, because they were always calling me with like, what do we do next? Or we ran into this, what do we do? And how do we handle this? And the customer asked this, what do I tell them? And they kept calling me with all these questions. And so my day was just bogged down with all this mess. And we were really struggling in this. I mean, if I were on the job, the product was great. If I checked on it enough, the product was great. But if I didn't show up, I knew there was going to be some kind of problem. Well, I attended a seminar, okay? I talk about a lot of conferences and seminars that I attend, because I attend a heck of a lot of seminars and conferences, because they're part of growing me as the leader, growing my perspective, thus growing my company and my income and my freedom to give me what I want. So, a side note, find you some conferences, find you some seminars. If you want to know some good ones, email me. I will hook you up with some great seminars. They grow you as the leader. Everything rises and falls on you, so you got to be sharp, okay? Good side note. Very important though. So I went to this seminar called Afterburner. It's a group of fighter pilots from the Air Force. And they talk about how in the Air Force, they can take this young kid out of college, maybe he's 25 years old, and put him in a $40 million airplane and fly him Mach 5 across the sky, and he can bring it back and land it safely. I was like, crap. I couldn't take a 35-year-old guy and get him to install a door plumb. I couldn't get him to put a door in without it just, swinging open or shut on its own. I couldn't teach him how to do that. Or if I hung it with them, they could do it right. But when I would leave them to do it by themselves, something wouldn't work right. The striker wouldn't line up. It'd be some kind of something. They would just jack it up, and I couldn't figure out what they were doing. And I was like, how can they put this young kid in this airplane, and I can't even teach a guy how to hang a door consistently? And they taught us how to fix that. See, it's not that their guy's that much smarter. He's really not. I hired a smart guy. I just didn't set him up for success. So here's how you do that. I've got years and years and years of experience in my field, and you do too. And I just expected that everybody I hired would have that same experience. And just because I knew how to do it, I assumed they knew how to do it. And after I showed them once or twice, I figured they needed to catch on, and they should just, I've already shown them, they should be doing it, right? And I'm sure you're the same way. You get aggravated with having to reteach and reteach and reteach all the time because you're a big picture thinker. You don't like the details, and having to teach over and over and over and over just frustrates you. So here's how you fix that. You've got to have a list of all the lessons you've learned through the entire time you've been in business. You've got to have a list of lessons learned for everything that every person that's ever worked for you has done. Even the people that have worked for you, that if they haven't made a mistake or whatever at your company, one of these, you've got to collect lessons learned from their past. All right, so you got to get your whole group together, and you've got to write down all the lessons learned from doing this type of work, whatever your type of work is. All the things that they can remember and that you remember that you have done that have just screwed things up. Anything that you've done or they or anybody that has broken momentum or has kept you from being efficient or that has just screwed something up or has lost you money or caused you stress, whatever it is, make that list. Then you got to have another list, all the things that you know that when you repeat these, you win. You make more money. You do things quicker. Causes less stress. You have a better product, whatever it is. Lesson learned. Lessons learned of dumb things, don't do again. Lessons learned of great things, always repeat these. All right? You got to start off with that. Then you've got to have a strategy meeting. So you or the project manager or the foreman or the director of operations, whoever, I don't know, whoever is in charge of closing the deal on a project and coordinating it. That person needs to put together a complete plan, okay, a big plan, but then he's got to create a strategy, a tactic, how things are going to be marched out. Then the group comes in and he delivers this to them. He's like, okay guys, here's what we're going to do. Here's the big picture of the job. We're whatever we're going to go do, here's what we're doing. And then he needs to tie it back to one of these. Because you got to help your team connect on a heart level, and they need to understand that what they're doing today is going to affect the big picture of somebody's life. So that it's not just a job, now it's a service. They're on a mission to do something greater and to contribute and to serve somebody. Making sense? Good. Okay, so somebody, whoever's in charge, is going to create this strategy on this project. If you've done this thing 1,000 times, awesome. Create another strategy. Don't take for granted that you just know how to do it because y'all have done it 1,000 times. There's no need in sitting down and having a plan. Don't do that. I mean, how long have you been driving? Have you ever left your keys? Yeah. Why? Is it that you didn't know you needed the keys? No, you just forgot them. If you forget your keys, it's aggravating, and it costs you a little time trying to find them. If you forget a tool, if you forget some supplies, if you forget to order that thing, if you forget to load it on your truck, if y'all go out and do service type work, it's aggravating, it costs you time, and time costs you money. And time costs you your freedom. So if your guys are having to spend their time going back and forth to the supply store or coming back to your shop to pick up stuff or whatever it is, they just simply forgot a shovel, right? It happens. Somebody took it off the truck. Nobody checked the checklist to make sure the shovel's back on the truck, and so they had to drive 20 miles back to the shop or 10 miles to Lowe's or whatever and buy another darn shovel. And all they really had to do is just have a strategy that came with a checklist and all of this so that they don't forget these things. They don't have to drive back because time is money and time is freedom. That 20 minutes to drive to the store or to the shop and back becomes 40 minutes. Along the way, they stop and they get a drink at the store, or they go ahead and stop and get their lunch, or whatever it is. And that 20 minutes turns into 40 minutes, and the next thing it's an hour, and then they got to get back to the job site and get started back up. And it makes you get finished an hour later that day. If you're paying your guys by the hour, which you're going to eventually stop that junk, then they just cost you another hour. And it's all because you and me didn't create a system of constant improvement to where you planned and gave them a strategy, and inside that strategy you gave them lessons learned, guys, in the strategy meeting, we're going to do this thing. I've included a list of lessons learned. Let me think of one. Let's say we're putting on a roof, okay? Lessons learned from the past, guys. We don't go through and drive nails back down into the plywood. If the decking nails, and if I'm talking about something you don't understand, then don't worry about it. I'm just giving an example. Somebody out here understands it. So the decking nails have backed out of the plywood. And so the guys go through and they drive the nails back down. But see, they pulled back because of the expansion and contraction of the wood and the metal and all this. And so they're kind of sticking up. Well, they come and they drive that nail back down and it looks good for today. And then in about a year, you get a call back. The people have a leak, right, in their roof. And it's because your guys drove that nail and that decking right back down. It worked its way back up, poked a hole through the shingles, roof leak. Roofing lesson right there, right? That's free. What they've got to do, lessons learned, guys. When we do a roof, if you see any decking nails, you check them all out. If you see any that are backed out, you pull them out and you put a screw in place of it. Look at that. Lesson learned from the past. I just have saved myself a warranty callback. Boom. Money. Time. Saves it. Got to have lessons learned. Every single time. Now, the next thing you got to have is list of contingencies. Contingencies, things that could go wrong. Let's stay on the roofing thing. So you're tearing off a roof, and it's middle of the summer. And you know, middle of the summer, you get these pop-up thunderstorms that were not on your phone's weather app. It didn't show anything about any darn thunderstorms today. And you just pulled this roof off, and the house is exposed to the elements now, and all of a sudden, boom, here comes the thunderstorm. Rains for about 15 minutes, and you get a few spots on the kitchen ceiling. See, I'm speaking from the past. Understand this. Those are lessons learned from my past, right? But here's how you fix that. You go to the roof before you leave. Part of the plan and part of the list of what you're going to give them is, guys, make sure you've got tarps that are big enough and adequate enough to cover the roof, or at least the exposed area. Contingency, see? And then that becomes, you have a plan for that. You have a contingency, something that could go wrong, and then you just gave them a plan. Hey guys, when you see and you got to have a trigger for that. All right, when do you get the tarp out? Do you wait till it's starting to rain? No. You already have your tarp ready to go when you arrive at the job that morning, and everybody knows where it is. You don't take it off the truck and move it somewhere. You make sure it's right where it needs to be. It's always in the same spot, so the guy that needs to grab it can grab it. All right, it's part of your checklist. And then you're like, okay, guys, here's a trigger. We see the first cloud come up, you grab the tarp, put it on the roof, hold it up there. Then you determine when you're going to unfold it, okay? But you don't want to wait till it's actually raining. So you got a contingency, and you got to have a contingency plan. If this, then we do this. If this happens, we do this. But we got to always plan for the contingencies, the what ifs, because what ifs happen all day long. You know? It just does. So lessons learned, contingencies, and then you got to have, well, the contingency plan. So, hey guys, we are going to this address and we're going to replace the roof today. Got it. These people are living in their dream home and they want to protect their investment. Now, they also have small kids, and I've sold them on the fact that when we leave, there will be absolutely no trace of any nails, no plywood splinters, nothing that their kids are going to step on. Their kids can walk out barefooted when we finish with this roof. They can have peace of mind knowing that their kids are safe while we're there. And then when we leave, it's going to be completely clean. And we're also going to help them protect their investment. Okay? That's what we're doing. We're not just putting on shingles. We're protecting sometimes their greatest investment, and we're taking care to make sure that their kids are safe and they can play freely in the yard. See? Now, if you're competing against that riffraff roofing company that's just going to come in there and blow and go, the rip and skip kind of guy, you can sell on value because they are putting on shingles for them. You are making sure that you're protecting their greatest investment and taking care of their kids, and you're making sure their yard's still going to be safe for them to play in. The other company didn't even bring that up. You just raised the bar. And they're comparing everybody to you now because you're telling them all these wonderful things. You've added value so you can charge more for your shingles because there's greater value there. Make sense? You can do that in everything you do. It's always about adding value by connecting your product to the bigger picture of their life. I hope this is really, really making sense because it can really, really change your money. All right? Guys, we're going to do this. Remember, when you're pulling the shingles off, if you see any nails that have backed out, don't drive those darn things back down. It's going to cost us warranty, which will cost you money because remember, everybody's going to be on a profit sharing plan. So it's going to cost you money. It's going to cost you time when we have to go back. So let's don't do that. See any nails? Pull them out, put the screws in them. And one of them says, hey man, we know that. We've been roofing all this time. You say that all the time. Yeah, and I'll say it again tomorrow because we can't afford to make that mistake again. There might be a new guy in here. If we don't repeat this constantly, we may not say it when he needs to hear it. Whatever. Okay? And remember, the tarp is on the truck, back left-hand corner, whatever. Stays there. First cloud, Paco grabbed the tarp, bring it to the top of the roof. First thunderclap, unfold the tarp. Whatever we got to do. That's how you do it. All right. The next thing you got to have is the briefing. And in the briefing, everybody's there. All key staff. You've put together the strategy. You have all this, and now you're just telling them everything. It's going to be detailed. And it's going to have all the checklist. You've created the strategy. Somebody has. Now you're doing the briefing. That's when you're bringing them in and you're telling them, you're giving them the sheet of all the lessons learned. On that sheet, it has contingencies. It's got the plan for those contingencies. All key staff. Project manager, estimator, foreman, lead laborer, whoever is involved in that project. You don't have to get all the laborers involved, but if you can, if it's practical to get them all together, I would absolutely do it. Now, not in the major meeting, but I would have whoever the foreman is or the supervisor on the project, I would have him to have like a toolbox type talk. In whatever situation, I'm talking about construction type stuff. But if you're cutting grass or if you're in a restaurant, you own a restaurant, it's the same thing. This whole staff needs to always tie everything back to the bigger picture. If you own a gym, same thing all the time. Tie it back to the bigger picture. Everybody needs to know the big picture because it helps them to think outside the box, which helps grow your company. So all key staff got to be in there. Then you've got to have one person sitting in on that major meeting, that one major job meeting, that has no clue about anything you're doing. For us, we use maybe an administrative assistant. We'll use a bookkeeper, anybody. And we don't want them to know anything about the job. Now, we'll brief it to them. They're going to hear about it, but we don't want them to know how to do the work. We don't want them to be experienced in what we're doing. We want somebody in there that has no clue because that person will ask what we would all consider to be the dumb question, like the rookie question. So when you have a bunch of experienced people sitting around the table, some of them are a little reluctant to raise their hand and say, what about this? Because they're thinking, well, everybody knows this answer, and I hate to ask it. So they don't ask it. And it goes, somebody else needed to know that too. They wanted to know, but they're scared to ask it. Pride's too high or whatever. So you need one person in there that's just kind of like the plant. It's for them. They're like the ones that are charged with having to ask the rookie question. And what they'll do is, since they don't really know much about your product typically, they usually ask a question from the customer's perspective. So if your bookkeeper's sitting in there and she's a mother and you're talking about doing the roof, and she's going to say, how are y'all going to make sure no nails get on the ground? Because my kid's running around the yard barefooted. And somebody's like, oh, crap. Well, we put a tarp down. She's going to say, yeah, but what about the ones that roll off the tarp or bounce off the tarp? Oh, man, you got a point. Hey, guys, how far should we roll a tarp from the edge of the house? How far out in the yard should we come to make sure that none of the nails can bounce beyond the tarp? And then after that, what are we going to do? We're going to run a magnet around the yard, whatever it may be, right? But she asked that question from the customer's perspective. And hopefully you already went over it in your lessons learned, but if you didn't, then she just brought up a great question about how to serve your customer better, which adds more value. More value equals more money, which equals more freedom, which equals you and your team getting what you want in life. Always goes back there. Loving it, right? Very detailed. I mean down to what kind of nails you're going to use, what type of shingles you're going to use. Do they have kids? Is this a home with elderly people in it? You know, is there going to be a baby there? Are they going to be sleeping certain times of the day? Are you going to make the mom mad because the baby woke up? I mean, how can you plan around it? Whatever it may be, whatever your industry is, what are all the little details? The details of the product you're going to install, you know, what are you going to do, the colors and stuff, and then also the details of the customer and whatever you know about their life. You know, kind of the age range, like say the kids or the elderly, because if they're elderly, you're going to take different precautions, you know, different things like this. What is it? Very detailed. Then you got to have your checklist. You don't want the guys leaving the shovel. You don't want the roofing crew, since we're talking about roofing, you don't want them to forget to take the magnet or forget to take the tarp that's going to cover the roof. You don't want to do that. You don't want them to drive and waste time coming back because it costs you money, which costs you freedom, which costs you this. Every time. All right, so after we do the briefing, then we're going to do the follow-through. We're just going to do the job. We're going to follow through with our plan, our strategy. We're going to do what we said we're going to do. Simple as that. Just go to the job, do what you do. And the next thing is, when it's all done, we've got to review the job. So here's what you do now. I've been peeping in your window, right? So here's what you do. Job's over with, you go to the next job. What a mistake. What a wasted opportunity to get better. System of constant improvement. If you go to the job and you do the work, but you don't review the details of the job, you miss an opportunity to improve, because you'll forget the mistakes. You'll also forget some of the good things that you did. So what do? In the review, you review the details. You briefed details. Now you're going to review the details. What actually went on in this job? Okay? What went wrong? Well, nothing really went wrong. We had a little hiccup. You know, we forgot this, or maybe we picked out the wrong color, or I don't know. We had a little hiccup. And nothing went really wrong, but it just kind of slowed us down a little bit. Okay. Write that down. You know, we're going to create another list of lessons learned. So what happened? Oh, that. Gotcha. Well, we're going to put that in our lessons learned file of things to look out for, not to do again. That way, next time you brief the job, the lesson learned from that job will be in there. And they'll say, what else happened? Anything good happen on the job? Oh yeah, we actually got this thing done a little bit quicker, or we figured out a better way to get this, whatever. For real, that's awesome. Write that down, lessons learned. Next time we'll do that. And it's all, you'll just take a little bit step further. You won't take that other step back, and you'll take another step further. And then you're going to push, and you're going to make another mistake. But it's going to be a new mistake, because we're not going to repeat any old mistakes, because those have already been brought up as our lessons learned from the past. your team, they don't want to make mistakes. Now, you may think that they don't care. You may think, golly, man, if they just cared like I do. Let's go back to the leadership and the team videos. Why should they care? Well, because I'm paying them good money. I'm paying them $15 an hour. You wouldn't work for $15 an hour. I ain't knocking it. What I'm saying is, don't say you're paying them good money. That's cop-out. You're their leader. You need to give them opportunity. But if you're like, I'm paying them good money, then you're looking too short-sighted as well. They want to tie to the big picture. How are you helping them do this? How is working for you helping them get here? If you're just a check on Friday, and where you're exchanging their time for money, if you're paying them by the hour, they don't have anything invested in your company. There's no skin in the game. They have no reason to work super hard for you and try to get things done fast. They have no reason to even respect your lessons learned or your contingencies. They don't care, because they're just there to get the job done so they can get paid at the end of the week. And they don't want you fussing at them. Sometimes they'll do this thing so you don't fuss at them. You've got to create a culture of absolute excellence where people are growing. You've got to make sure that your team is constantly on a track of personal growth in all areas of their life, not just getting better at work. I mean, are their marriages getting better? Do you see them making better health choices? Maybe they're going to the gym a little bit. Are they starting to read? You've got to be really engaged with your team in order to know these things. But if they're not growing in their life, they're not going to grow your business. They're going to grow your stress, but they're not going to grow your business. Growing people grow businesses. People that are not growing will not grow your business. That's a hard decision. Because I know sometimes you've got a lot of people that are working for you that you really like them. They're nice guys and they do good work. But they're not invested in the outcome. Now, is it your fault? Have you not set them up with opportunity? Do they feel like they're just being used? Have you taken a good person and turned him bad by paying him by the hour, which is giving him an incentive to work slower? Or are you demoralizing him by just giving him a straight salary where he can't make more money no matter what he does? So have you taken him and turned him bad? You're like, this is supposed to be the product lesson. What are you talking about teams for? Because your team is your product. They're producing that thing. They're building it. They're making it. They're doing the service, whatever it is. So it's got to go back to your team, which goes back to you. You hired them, and you're keeping them. So it's your fault. The success of your company is dependent upon you. Everything rises and falls based upon you, the leader. Now, if you'll apply all this stuff, it will decrease your stress level, you will serve your customers better, and you will make more money. Now, I hope this serves you well. Until I see you in the next video, pursue your dreams, discover your mission, and live every moment fully alive. Have a great day.